In Module 8, we're going to look at student learning adjustments and students as instructional resources. The information in this presentation comes from James Popham's book Transformative Assessment and Dylan Wiliam's book Embedded Formative Assessment. There are a couple terms used in this presentation that we should define. The first one is student learning adjustments. James Popham defines this as an evidence-based adjustment to learning tactics, supported but not dictated by the teacher. A couple important things here is evidence-based and supporting but not dictating. And you'll see these ideas come up in this presentation. The other term is a learning tactic. Learning tactics are procedures, techniques, processes a student uses to learn something. So really, any kind of action a student takes to learn a concept or to master a performance or skill. When it comes to learning tactics and student learning adjustments, teachers are key to support both of these by, number one, structuring their classroom. So students are always receiving evidence about how they're learning. And then encouraging students to take the responsibility for making their own learning adjustments. To do this, teachers must orient students to learning tactics. Students need to understand key questions, the whys, the hows, the whats about learning adjustments. And the key thing here is that you probably want to prepare information that is accessible through things like a blog or a website, so that not only can students see it once, but they could see it again and again, and also it can be shared with parents. A couple clarifications that students need in order to do this successfully. First of all, they have to understand the qualities or elements of the skill or knowledge that is to be learned. Really, they need to understand the learning objective. One strategy that Popham gives is one that's familiar, where you rewrite the learning objective in student-friendly language, hand this to students and ask them to paraphrase or rewrite this description. When you collect them, you could look at them to see if they're similar. If they are, your objective was probably clear and understandable. If not, you may need to revise it so students understand it. Second clarification would be students need to understand the criteria used to judge the quality of learning. So here your rubric needs to be distributed, and a very important thing along with the rubric would be examples of strong and weak work, so students can see what the language is describing. Third clarification is students understand the sub-skills and enabling knowledge involved in what is to be learned. Of course, this is in your learning progression, so this needs to be shared with students graphically, perhaps through a poster. Again, I think you could look at sharing this virtually or electronically or digitally as well, through a video or through a website or a blog. Mentioned before, the teacher needs to support students' learning adjustments. And by supporting, you're not assigning this as a task that they must comply with, but you are providing them with the tools and the motivation to adjust their own learning. The first step would be to announce these adjustment occasions. Explain when information is going to be available, perhaps publishing assessment schedule, and explaining that it's their responsibility to use this information. I think here you would want to take some time to train them how this might work. It might not be as effective just to hand them a sheet that shows when things will be assessed. Second step is to help students obtain assessment information. And the next few slides will give us a couple strategies here. You need to make feedback from these building block assessments easily available. Here are some digital tools like a Moodle course or an Edmodo or even in Google Doc can provide instantaneous feedback to a student. Another strategy would be to supplement building block assessments with optional student-selected assessments. Think about your course over a number of semesters or years. You might have created many different kinds of assessment materials and you're not using all of them currently. Well, these can be made available to students who can then take them on their own time of their own choice. Peer assessment can be a big tool to help as well. Popham gives an interesting idea where he calls it the testing team, in which students create assessment procedures for building blocks and offer the opportunity for other students to take part in these assessments. We're going to take a little break from Popham's steps and look at what Dylan Wiliam has to say about cooperative learning. First of all, it does work according to Wiliam and others, and there's 4 factors that make it work. I think the key one is motivation. The fact that students in well-structured cooperative learning settings have a self-interest to help one another learn. Wiliam mentions a number of different instructional resources or strategies. One interesting one here that I like is the pre-flight checklist. So before a student submits an assignment, someone else needs to sign off on a checklist that shows that the required elements are present. Back to Popham's supporting learning adjustments, step 3. Students would set their own adjustment triggers, and the teacher would guide them in setting these levels that indicate the need for an adjustment. So think back to Module 7. We created these for our instruction. It makes sense that a student could do the same thing for their learning. The example here, the student might say, if I do not earn a score of 80% on tomorrow's quiz, I'll need to make an adjustment to my learning tactic. Final step is students make adjustments to their learning tactics. This could be simply a teacher consulting and suggesting specific adjustments related to what the student is currently doing. Perhaps some mini lessons could be used here if you have groups of students who want to try the same tactic. And another key thing is to ask students to schedule time to practice this new learning tactic.